Shkoyach, and a big thank you to Adam for all the amazing work. Yes, Shkoyach. Okay, we are speaking about the fundamental necessity of owning our identity, and the identity being the 13 principles of core belief of the Jewish people. And we're starting to put the core beliefs that we have into the context of Yetzias Mitzrayim, that this was downloaded to us, this was shown to us in the experience of leaving Egypt, going down into Mitzrayim, going through the entire Exodus, as is presented in clear terms in the Torah, as a primary source document, and that culminates in the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. And we're going through these core beliefs now, and we're learning the Ramban, the great Rishon, who's explaining how this fits in to all the mitzvahs that we do. And we're going through, and then we're going to see afterwards how this fits into many, many mitzvahs we do. We're going to see all the 13 principles even more clearly laid out within the entire narrative in the verses of the Torah. So we're going weiter means forward in Yiddish, we're going weiter in the Ramban. So the Ramban points out, Vehichmir me'oid be'inyan zeh, that Hashem is very, very stringent, if you will. Hashem is very, very clear that Hashem wants us to really think about Yetzias Mitzrayim. And we find that the Exodus makes many, many appearances throughout our mitzvahs. And we're going to see that not only is it something that comes up in a lot of places, but it has like a certain necessity to it. So for example, we find that on Passover, there's two elements that seem like really strict. Eating chametz on Pesach, which is fascinating. Many people, they know, even if they've strayed sadly from the path of Torah, they know that when it comes to Pesach, like try to get the bread out of the house. Or even if you grew up in a home where maybe you weren't exactly keeping everything, you probably wouldn't want to have a piece of, a loaf of rye bread on the table during the Passover Seder. You knew stay away from that. And we take it really to the furthest reaches, that any contact with chametz on Pesach is like, we know it's serious. Why is it so important? Because any time that you make contact with Pesach, you're going to see that there's a lot of stringency. Because what Hashem is telling us, and the Ramban is explaining, is that Hashem wants us to make it super crystal clear that everything that happened around the entire Exodus is a core to us. And therefore, if we deviate from that core, we're losing identity. And that's bad. And so therefore, on Pesach, if you think oh, come on, I want one of those, hoagie sandwiches. So it's not just it's that there has to be something really core here, deeply core, that's reminding us. So much so that the punishment is what's called kares. Kares means I'm literally leaving. I'm leaving or being, God forbid, cut off from me. So what Hashem is really telling you is it's so severe to be cut off from who you are. It's so severe to be cut off from your true identity. It's so severe to be cut off from what it means to be a Jew. It's severe. It's not just like a nice thing, cultural, and it's like a social thing, and we like to hang out, and matzo ball soup's great, and gebraks. But it's fine. There's something core value, core identity. And also we see the same thing when it comes to not eating the Pascal offering. Is that how you say it, Abe? The Pascal offering? The Pesach offering, which is one of the two positive mitzvahs. There's only two in the entire Torah. That if you don't do this positive thing, it bears with it kares, like a certain cutting off from identity. One of them is not eating the Pesach, the Paschal lamb, and therefore I'm really into, personally, raw foods, superfoods, eating a lot of vegan. But even a vegetarian, a vegan person, will at least have to have 1 kazayas of meat per year. There's nothing wrong if you feel that meat doesn't agree with your system. That's totally fine. But 1 small matchbox size of meat per year, that much, believe me, it agrees with your system. On Passover night, I promise you, it agrees with your system. It agrees with your soul, and you'll see, for 1 night of the year, it will agree with your body as well. And therefore, it's a core, both Pesach, chametz, being very, very hardcore, and eating the Pesach. By the way, anybody know the second thing that is a positive thing for not doing the positive thing? That's the bris milah.
Is it?
That's the bris milah.
Don't shoo the bird away from the mom.
So that's another great mitzvah, but that's not the same type of severity. That has a lot to do with teaching us about compassion. But here we're talking about a core thing that creates a certain amount of cutting off, God forbid, because God is saying that bris milah is core as well. Okay, which also we know that was given to Avram. That's the first Jewish person. So when we're talking about core identity, you're always going to see, it would seem like something almost severe. Yeah, because leaving your core identity is not just something that, it's not a good idea to do or whatever, it's Hashem is trying to position us with a consciousness that if it's core to who we are, we want to make sure we hold on to that core belief. V'hitzrich shenichtav kol ma shenira eleinu ba'oisais v'moifsim al yodeinu ve'al beineinenu. And furthermore, Hashem said it's so core, everything that we developed from the entire experience of going down to Mitzrayim and coming out, that anybody else know something else that Hashem says, I want you to do something. I want you to actually write down what happened, and I want you to bind it between your eyes. I want you to bind it with your pineal gland. It's a decalcifying technology, by the way. I want you to bind it here. I want you to bind it on your arms, which means action in the world. I want you to bind it with your consciousness. Of course, we're talking about tefillin. Tefillin is a technology which is filled with all the core beliefs. And it's filled with leaving Egypt. Filled. The whole thing is talking about it. Core belief. I want you to literally bind it to you. Like strap up, Take your blood pressure. Literally strap it on there and bind it to yourself. And that's a physical way that you're reminding yourself every single day. That's how we do it right in the morning. You put on tefillin. You wake up in the morning, one of the first things we do is you put on our tefillin, which is speaking all about Yetzias Mitzrayim as a core. And when you put on your tefillin, one of the things you're supposed to thinking about is everything that it says in the tefillin. Some people like to read all the parshias of tefillin, what it says inside the tefillin. But spiritually, you're bonding yourself to those core fundamental ideas. Not only that, and those are the very things that we all saw as was given to us in the Torah. So the nation that accepted everything that was happening and said, you all saw this, and the people that said, we were there, yes, and we accept this, in this Torah it says, and you are to write those things that you saw on your arms, between your eyes, that you're going to keep it with you in an unbroken transmission until today. It's amazing. It's amazing. And when you put on tefillin, you feel like you're connecting to something. You're not the first person, by the way. We've been wearing tefillin since the times all the way back. Says the Ramban, and there's something else that we write. V'nichtav oisay oid, and not only that, I want you to write this technology of remembering. And here we're going to see, remember core Jewish identity on every single one of your doorposts. Because you know what it says in your mezuzah? Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. God is one. That's a core belief to us. That's the Jewish message to the world, that God is one. You know how many times you pass through a doorpost? Every time you pass, have you ever seen Rabbi Dober pass through a mezuzah? It's like he's getting zapped. He'll tell you. Sometimes he even makes like a motion because he actually feels it. It literally, you're touching the mezuzah, there's a download, and you're supposed to consciously think everything that it says inside the mezuzah. It's an amazing technology that, you know, like doorposts you go through. Every time you're going through a doorpost, that consciousness is going to stay with you. Now, as an interesting thought, why on doorposts? Well, the Torah says, there used to be an old person in the world when I was growing up, back in the day. His name was Jim Morrison. Okay? I don't think he was such a religious man, but he had his own ways of seeing the world. And he had a band called The Doors, and he spoke about this inyan called the doors of perception. And they used to have, you know, like in some of these like hippie festivals, like you'd be in the middle of a desert, and there'd just be like a door frame, like in the middle of the desert. And then before you would come to the festival, you can't just like like go through the door frame. It's just a door frame in the middle of a desert. Like, no, you don't understand. You can't come to the festival unless you go through the door frame, because you're existing in one realm of consciousness. You need to go through the door of perception to a new world of consciousness. Because in this festival, we're all on the other side of the door frame. You know what I'm saying? You chop what I'm saying? I'm sure there's a bunch of LSD also. But you know what I'm saying? You have to go through the door. But the idea was that you wouldn't need that. You just need to go through the door of perception. Because now, bless you, now you're going to see the world in a totally new way. So, lahavdil, Elef Alfei Avdalos, we have our own door of perception. It's called a mezuzah. That when you go through, and by the way, there's many, many points in Jewish law which relates to going through door frames and going from inside a domain to outside a domain, many, many things, details about making blessings, brachas, many things, Shabbos. That when we go through a door frame, you're changing into a new universe. Anybody saw, what's that? Wizard of Oz? No, Wizard of Oz? With Dorothy? Yeah, Wizard of Oz. And like there's that scene where Dorothy opens up the door and it's all of a sudden color. And you just like, there's like a moment of a new world. We're not in Kansas anymore. You know that one? That is, when you open up a door and you go through that frame, there's another world you're entering into. So for the Jew, having the mezuzah on the door is every time that you're moving to a new place of consciousness, what do you bring with you every time? Hashem is one. Hashem is one. This is so core to us that God says in the book, given to the ones who experienced it, write this truth, this reality that you all experience on every one of your door frames. Everywhere. You go to a Jewish home, there's mezuzahs everywhere. On your door frames, on the doors to the city, on the gates. You never stop this consciousness. It's literally put into the system that this is going to be something that you're constantly thinking about, meditating on. This is so fundamental. I told you, this Ramban is like the classic Ramban. Not only that, the Torah says something else. And then we say it. The Torah says what? When you lie down at night, talk about this. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. When you wake up in the morning, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. You're constantly meditating on the core truths. And the Torah says this is going to be the technology that you're going to stay with this through thousands of years, all the way to Mashiach and the world to come. It's amazing. Kamoisha Amru, Enes v'yotziv. De'eraisa memasha kosav laman tizkor es yom tzeischa meretz mitzrayim kol yemei chayecha. That we're speaking about the truth of this all the time, every day, non-stop. And it's always fascinating because people think like, I didn't grow up religious, you know. So sometimes I'm in people's houses and I'm like, do you have any pictures Like sometimes you see like a picture on the mantle, by the fireplace. Like, oh, that's like it's my great-grandfather, like they look pretty religious. Oh yeah, of course. Yeah, they were all religious then. So what about you? Like, why do you look all, wearing some Guns N' Roses t-shirt and doing like, where's the strings? They all had strings. Oh, I don't know, like, we're not judging. A lot of what happened was when people came to America, it wasn't so simple because you had to work on Saturday. And if you didn't work on Saturday, don't bother coming in on Monday. So we're not judging. We don't understand what that means. So people would get a new job every single week, and for some it wasn't a simple thing. But that's only a couple generations in the entire story. And by the way, many, many millions never had that either. They were always keeping every single thing precise. How many generations is it from you and I back to the giving of the Torah? Anybody know?
30?
Not that many. Not that many. There's about 100. Why is that? Because I sit at a Passover Seder, which also is part of this. God says not only do you have every one of these reminders that you see, this is all primary source material everywhere. You can't go around denied it. They're everywhere. Furthermore, the Torah says, I want every single one of you to sit by a Passover Seder. And you know what you do at that Passover Seder? I want you to tell over every single thing that happened. So I'm sitting at my Passover Seder. My kids are there. But you know who else is there? My father is there. And his father is there. So how many generations do we have? So you thought that's 4 generations. I mean, my kids are there, The Alter Zaidi, the great-grandfather, could be there with his great-grandchildren. So how many generations are there? Let's say I have 5 generations. I have myself, I have my kids, their kids, and I could also have my father and his father, my grandfather. You could have a great-great-grandfather there. How many, you have maybe 4 or 5 generations there. So are my grandkids hearing it only from their father or from their grandfather, from me? No, they're hearing it from their great-grandfather or great-great-grandfather. Now, the great-grandfather, he also sat at a Passover Seder, right? Every single year. Who did he hear it from? His father. But he might have also been in a Passover Seder where his grandfather was there and his father was there. So all of a sudden, within the grandson to the great-great-grandfather, or the grandfather, let's say, he was sitting at a Passover Seder with his great-grandfather. You could have 8 generations easily in 2 transmissions. I heard from the one who heard. Those transmissions is only 100. You could fit 100 people in this room. That's insane, by the way. It's not as far back as you think it is. So we have 100 generations, unbroken, and then a few of us, okay, that we grew up the way we grew up, but you look on your fireplace and you see a bunch of religious-looking people. For 97 other generations, it was unbroken. And for millions, never broke a single part of the chain. So either you have 100 straight generations, or you have 97, a couple where it gets a bit shaky, and then all of us that are bringing it back on course, my friends. You're very powerful what you're doing right now. You're bringing your whole family lineage back on course from the way that it always was, with unlimited signs all over the place. Core belief. Oh, here's another one. Make a sukkah, says the Ramban. Why should you make a sukkah? Laman yedu deresechem ki besukkah seishavti b'nei Yisrael. Make a sukkah. The Torah says, why do you make sukkahs? Because I sat you in booths when you left Egypt. So not only, you can't deny it, you walk around, there's sukkahs everywhere on sukkahs. Where do those things come from? The Torah said, make sukkahs. We've been making sukkahs since we left Egypt. Thinking again, when you're sitting in the sukkah, Hashem took us out of Mitzrayim. Either thinking about the literal sukkahs that we sat in, or the Ananei HaKavod, the clouds of glory. Endless signs all around us of core belief. That we never leave the place, the experience, that we got the deepest core belief of who we are. V'chein kayotze behen mitzvos rabos. And says the Ramban, there's many other mitzvahs like this that are always reminding you, keeping it in your consciousness. Who knows another one? You guys are always welcome. Friday night, come to my house, right? We hold a cup of wine on a Friday night. You know what we say? Zeicher Yitzias Mitzrayim. Mitzrayim again. It's everywhere. You redeem your firstborn son. Zeicher Yitzias Mitzrayim. Non-stop. V'akol liyos lanu b'kol hadoros. Eidus. All of this is non-stop testimony. Every time you look at a mezuzah, every time that you have your tefillin, every pair of tefillin ever is another testimony to leaving Egypt. That's a lot of witnesses, by the way. How many pairs of tefillin you think have existed through the generations? And we're constantly making more. Every day there's the factories of tefillin. You guys got your tefillin checked? Make sure you do it. They're solid, Rolls Royces. Make sure they're... Especially, by the way, we have a custom by El, in the month of Elul, which is coming up. We're already rounding the corner towards El and Rosh Hashanah, that people get their mezuzahs checked, their tefillin checked. They want to make sure that everything is like lined up. Right? You get maintenance on the engine. Make sure you get maintenance, that everything is precise. Why does it have to be so precise? Because when you're talking about core, fundamental identity, it has to be precise. The core fundamental identity of who we are is precise. It's not wishy-washy. It's absolutely defined and precise. Therefore, we want it to be Rolls Royce, perfect craftsmanship. As we see with many, many mitzvahs, they're all eidus. Okay, so what do we see today? We're going deeper in now to all of the testimonies of this experience that Hashem is telling us to literally be thinking about this testimony. You see it everywhere around you, and it becomes an absolute identification feature of we know who we are. It's clear who we are. And there's many things that the Torah could have spoken about or put in the tefillin, but it puts in the ikarim, the keys to our identity. And that's why in this year we're learning these 13 key points of what the Jew is literally made of. And by doing this, we should be zeicher to own our identity and to be able to use that to be a great light to the world. And with that will bring Mashiach. And the binyan beis hamikdash b'mehera v'yameinu amen. Have a wonderful day, a wonderful Shabbos.